Hello, I'm Mark Price. I'd like to talk to you today about encounters. There was a well-known art collector. He was known for his art. He had Rembrandts and Cézannes, Monets, Utrios, some of the best art that a collector could have, and this man owned it. And he had a son, and his son went off to war. This is back at the time of the Vietnam War, but his son never returned. He died during the war. And one day, a few years after the war, a young man came to see this art collector. And he said, "You don't know me, sir, but I served with your son. And your son saved my life. Your son died a hero. Your son kept going into fire to rescue people like me who had been shot or wounded and bring us out. And just after he brought me out, he was killed. So he says, I just want to say to you, thank you for your son. And I want to give you a gift." He said, "Your son used to talk about you and tell us you were an art collector. So I'm not a good painter by any stretch, but I painted this picture of your son. And I want you to have it." Well, this art collector was excited, and he took the picture, went into his library, took down, I think it was a Rembrandt, and put up in its place this painting done by this fellow soldier, the painting of his son. Well, many years later, when the art collector died, there was an auction held for his artwork, all these wonderful, great pieces of art. And when the auction started, the first painting that was brought forward was the painting made by the soldier of his son. And the auctioneer started to call for bids, and people were disappointed. They wanted to get to the good stuff. They wanted to get to the Rembrandts and the Cézannes. They wanted to get to the paintings that they really had hopes to purchase. But the first one was the one of the son. And it was hard for the auctioneer to get bids, and finally one man who knew the art collector and knew how much he loved his son said, "I'll bid on it." And I don't remember the bid, 100, 200, something like that, maybe $500. And the auctioneer said, "Sold." And then he said something that surprised and shocked everybody. He said, "The auction is now closed." And people were angry, they were bothered, they wanted to be able to purchase on the greater pieces of art. And the auctioneer said, "According to the will of the art collector, the one who takes the son gets everything. The one who takes the son gets everything." And our taking the son is all about how we encounter and how we recognize the son. There was, the gospel today is from Luke. I'm not going to read it, but you can see at the bottom of your screen the verses, and I encourage you to read them. But it's from Luke, and it's the story of the road to Emmaus, which we talked about a few days ago or a week or so ago. And it's a story of these two men who were from Jerusalem, knew Jesus in Jerusalem, and were devastated by his death on the cross, and were now walking away from Jerusalem to Emmaus. It has been suggested they're getting away from their sorrow and their pain of losing their Messiah and going to Emmaus just to get away from everything. Well, it says in the gospel that Jesus appears in their midst and is walking right there along with them. And they start to talk to each other. Jesus is talking to them, asking them questions. They're responding to him. And then Jesus starts telling them about Scripture and quoting Scripture and pointing out all the places in Scripture that refer to Jesus and Jesus dying and rising from the dead. And then they reach Emmaus, and Jesus suggests that he's going to go further. And they said, "No, why don't you stay with us and come and have a meal?" And Jesus does that. And the scripture says that it was in the breaking of the bread at that meal that they finally recognized that it was Jesus. Well, I want to suggest that our relationship with Jesus is similar. In other words, we encounter him on the road of our life one way or another. We may not even know sometimes that it's Jesus. And then it is through that encounter that we start to communicate a little bit more about who he is, who we are, share ourselves with him. Jesus shares himself with us. We get into Scripture, it opens our minds, and our eyes and our heart to what the scripture is truly saying. And then, like these two from the road to Emmaus, it's when we see him with the breaking of the bread that we're reminded of the promises made by Jesus, who Jesus really is, and we recognize him as the resurrected Christ. This is their encounter, and this is how we encountered Jesus along the way of our life. The woman at the well, it was a process. Francis of Assisi, it was a process to come to know and understand who Jesus was. And I want to make a recommendation to you, because communion or Eucharist, this breaking of the bread, something that we Catholics have at every single one of our masses, and I believe every church of Christian foundation does at least once a month. They have Communion Sunday, and they have the bread and they share it, bless it and share it. So I want to encourage you during this pandemic to not give up on that. Even though we can't go to church, we can have what we used to call an agape or an agape service. The Greeks have 5 words for love. Agape is one of them, and it means a selfless love, the kind of love God has for us and that we're supposed to have for one another. So I want to recommend to you to not give up on finding Jesus along the way and recognizing him in the breaking of the bread by having your own agape service there in lockdown while you're in quarantine from this pandemic, with whatever, by yourself or whatever little group you have together, your family or whatever friends you're locked down with, or perhaps even electronically. And it's very, very simple. You start with a little prayer, giving thanks to God, recognizing God in your midst. You have a reading from the scriptures, and you can easily just pick whatever reading for the day. And then you have a little brief discussion about the readings. You take the bread, you bless the bread, you break it, you share it with one another. You take wine or grape juice or whatever you'd like to drink, you bless it, and then you share it with one another. And then you have a closing prayer. Very, very simple. Agape service, something you can do to help you recognize and encounter Jesus during this time of pandemic. Because remember, whoever recognizes, encounters, and takes the Son gets everything. This is Mark Price. Thanks for listening.